has now been around for 3 seasons, and coaches everywhere are saving time and being more efficient when it comes to scout cards. Coach Robinson from Texas says, "The thing I most enjoy is the ease of access to all the scout cards and how I can draw on them if I need to make any changes. Every coach that uses it says that it is so great to use. If you and your staff are tired of the old ways of preparing and using scout cards, check out thecoachpad.com to start enjoying Scout Team and making the 2023 season better than ever."
Welcome back to another episode of the Gap Down Backer podcast. Today we have the retired head coach and athletic director at Gold Beach High School out there in Oregon, Coach Kevin Swift. Coach, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing good. I'm doing very good. A little early, but I'm an early riser. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
No problem. That's the great thing about time zones. It's like it's early there, yeah. It's midday here, and it just
Yeah. I got up. It was dark out. There were deer in the yard, and the dog's going, "Are we going for a walk now?" I'm like, "No, you got to wait till I come back." So, but no, it's nice. I like mornings. I've always liked mornings. So this is
curious,
great.
curious question because like I've lived in Texas and Ohio. The deer in Ohio are fairly big, whereas in Texas they're like slightly oversized dogs. Like, how big do the deer get out there?
It depends on what part of the state. On the coast, we have blacktail, and they're relatively small. They get big racks, but they're small. I think the average, deer, you're probably going to get 60, 75 pounds of meat off. You go to Eastern Oregon where they have mule deer, and those aren't quite as big as the whitetail you guys have up in Ohio and parts of Texas. But what we have, and thank God they weren't in the yard this morning, but we have Roosevelt elk that are just, and Coach Swift doesn't hunt because it's always during football season, but I am more than willing to let some of my players who bow hunt and that bring me some backstrap off. In fact, we just last week, my wife, a kid, brought us a bunch of elk steak and backstrap.
There you go.
Cooked it up, and while I don't hunt, I'm really good at eating. So, but people ask me all the time, why don't you hunt? And I'm like, well, because hunting is August through October, and I'm hunting something else that time of year.
Yep.
So, but
Now,
yeah, they're a little smaller. So,
okay. I was just curious. It's because you mentioned that. Now, just in case somebody doesn't know who you are, like, and I think that'd be pretty hard. I said that before we came on. Like, I mean, you are fairly active on Twitter. You are well known in the flexbone/option community. But in case somebody on probably the East Coast has lived under a rock or isn't social media prone, kind of, do you want to talk about? I mean, you're retired now, but I mean, you were a longtime head coach at Gold Beach. I think 2 state championships, if I remember correctly, really successful. You want to kind of talk about kind of your career and kind of how you ended up where you are today?
I was born into a coaching family. My dad was an educator coach for 52 years in Southern California. Started in the late 50s and wrapped up in the late 90s. Actually, I think it might have been like 2008 is when his last year was. So no matter how hard they tried to talk me out of being a high school educator and coach, it's in my DNA. I grew up in Southern California, South Orange County. Attended Servite Trinity League School. Had a great experience there. Played a couple years at University of Northern Iowa. Came back and finished up at D3, University of Redlands, and immediately went into coaching. Started off at the collegiate level on the defensive side of the ball. I'm still passionate about, one of the reasons I run the option is because my heart, I'm a defensive coach. But at one time was the youngest defensive coordinator in the nation, and came to the realization that as much as I love Division III, and I really do like Division III, at that time nobody was making a living as an assistant at a D3 level. So started coaching. I was kind of a defensive mercenary. I went to one high school, be there for a couple of years, get the defense straightened out, and someone would come along and in Southern California, you can do that. You can just, okay, I'm going to turn this way on the freeway rather than that way, because schools are 20, 25 miles apart. So in 1997, after we had our first daughter, we moved to the really rural Oregon coast with a 4-month-old, and came up to be a head coach. My first head coaching opportunity, the only really head coaching opportunity I pursued, and became a head coach at Gold Beach High School on the Oregon coast, and went from 97 to 2018. And had a great deal of success, and truthfully had some failures too. I mean, someone asked me a guy asked me, says, what are you still doing this for? I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, well, you created this just ultimate small school program in Oregon, and you were dominant. You played in 5 state titles in 10 years, and he goes, you're not very good now. Why are you doing it? I go, because I'm a coach. I go, those guys that are 400 and 100, those are anomalies in the game. Anyone who spends a life coaching at the high school level is going to end up 50 games above 500 or 50 games below 500. I go, Bruce Rollinson's a good friend of mine. Bob Lattiser is a mentor, an acquaintance that I follow on that. And they're fantastic coaches, but they'll be the first to tell you that that's not where they're at. That's not the usual high school situation. I think if you spend 35 years coaching like I have, you're going to have a great deal of success, and you're also going to have some years where you're like, why am I doing this? But I'm a coach. It's in my DNA. I mean, and you asked, I'm pretty active on social media. Well, I don't get to coach kids anymore, so I'm trying to coach coaches, trying to help. I mean, I have so much love for this game because I know what it does for us culturally. I know it breaks down divisions that are coming. I know it makes us tolerant of other people. It makes us appreciate the diversity within the game, which will help us appreciate the diversity in our world. I mean, there's just so many valuable cultural and personal and manhood lessons that are taught in the game that are so important for our society. So yeah, I got to keep my hand in it somehow. I just have to. And I have a great deal of love and affection for the guys that taught me the game, and I want to continue to pay it forward like they did. So ended up in 97 in Gold Beach coaching high school football.
So like I said, we're going to hit on some of the option stuff. I've just been curious, and I mean, it's one of the things I've been looking at this offseason just in general, as just trying to learn more. We're going to hit on a bunch of different things, but like the first thing I want to ask you is, obviously the longer you're at school, the more advanced you get with your system because your kids are in the system longer. I think that's kind of typically. I'm not like, that's why I'm not sure, but like, I mean, you were in the option for a long time. Where do you typically recommend coaches start like year one in the option?
I think, first of all, one of the reasons I chose to run our version of the veer and option, which is much more similar to Nebraska's offense of the 70s and 80s than the service academies of today, is the simplicity of it. I wanted to be, and we still are very sophisticated and complicated on defense. And because our kids play both ways, you gotta manage your thinking for them. And so, I would say the first thing you need to do is create a terminology that the kids understand, appreciate, and buy into, and create some of those basic line calls, rules, and things like that. We run the option, but when there's only three blocking schemes. We're going to block inside veer, we're going to block outside veer, or we're going to block midline. So, and all of our plays that we run follow. I mean, we run power, and it's inside veer blocking. So I think you got to create a terminology and an offensive line system. Bob Lattiser, I think, I don't know, 15 years ago in a documentary that I was watching about this hour in the morning said, the true indicator of the quality of your team is always going to be tied to the offensive line. And, that kind of chapped my ass as a defensive coach. But as you think about it, your offensive line sets the tone for everything. They're going to, if you want a good defensive line, you better have a good offensive line that they can go against. And the one area of depth, we're a small school, but the one area of depth we always had was linemen. And I don't know why, but we were blessed with them. So while most of our kids played both ways, a lot of our linemen didn't have to play both ways. So I'd say, created, because I came up with my own terminology and we were practicing the first day and I called the play the way we call it. And I watched my two running backs run into each other. And my then offensive coordinator turned to me and says, how about we just call it double right? I'm like, hey, I like it. Because I was, 18 option, 19 option, stuff like that. So we created a terminology, a language, and an offensive line system in 1997 that we still use today. And I know we don't use it today because I'm not coaching, but we used it clear up to the end. A lot of coaches say, we're going to run a system that fits our personnel. And I agree with that. But we created a system that our personnel, regardless of size, speed, or that, could fit into. On years when we had more talent, more speed in that, we did a little bit more out of this side of the playbook. On years where we didn't have that talent and stuff, we ran a little more of this out of the playbook. I'm not a big fan of changing things every 2 or 3 years. In our playbook, I don't think it's deep, but it's very versatile. And in other words, we can have a wrinkle here, a wrinkle there, and not rock the boat if we have the ability to do that. So I think you just got to create a system for your offensive line that can gel and carry on from year to year. What particular plays? I think you want to get inside variant. I think you want to get outside variant. We didn't put midline in until 2 or 3 years later, because when I got here, flexbone wasn't a big deal. Not a lot of people who were running flexbone. So midline came later, but we ran inside veer, outside veer, and outside veer goes with lead and load and speed, which is just 2-man options. And then I stole from De La Salle like everybody did. And one of the reasons I like I backs as opposed to split backs is we became really good counter tray, counter GT pulling, and they call it power. A lot of people call that blocking scheme of power. We always called it counter because as a former defensive coordinator, I loved defending I teams because the fullback takes you to the ball. And so we would purposely, run inside veer 15 times and then come back with counter, and you'd watch the linebackers just run themselves right out of the play and, and run counter. And it was a lot of times that was a series breaker for us. So I think one of the greatest compliments my dad ever gave to me, and my dad and I were completely different coaches, completely different. He was a wing ting, secret handshake cult, all that things that go with wing T. And I just wasn't that smart. But he said, you have unbelievable patience. I'm like, well, I'm not sure that's a compliment, Dad. He goes, you don't have a problem going, 3 yards all the way down the field in a 9-minute drive. Most coaches can't do that. And I started studying that. We played he's a rivalry. He's a good guy. I love him. He's coaching up in the northern part of the state now, but he was a wing T guy, and we're playing him in 04 in the semis, and we're having problems stopping him. But then he gets down inside my 20 and he throws the ball 3 straight times. And I scream across this field, thanks, appreciate that. Because I think coaches get impatient. I think players get impatient. I think, where's that big play? Where's that 20-yard scoring drive? And I don't know. again, at my heart, I'm a defensive guy. I want to go, and you're a defensive guy. It's really easy if you give up a 60-yard touchdown to go, oh, we got a blown assignment, or hey, coach, really bad call. But when they're all the way down the field at 3-4 yards a clip, that steals the defensive soul. I mean, the frustration level, the aggravation, inability to adjust, really plays on a defensive psyche. And so, that you got to be patient with the install. You got to be patient with your kids. I think the first year you put in the option, I think you got to buy in and stay with it. You're not going to get what you want the first year. You're not going to get what you want the second year. You're not going to start seeing it gel and become what you want till you're, late in year 2, the beginning of year 3, because, and I would say that's true of any offense. I just don't think in the nature of high school and all of our kids playing multiple sports like we want, I just don't think you can expect results year 1 right away. I know you guys in Ohio have real strict limits on what you can do during this summer. We're pretty we're the Wild West out here. We can meet with our kids. We can go to padded camps and compete and do those things. But I think you got to be patient, and you got to believe with what you're installing. I think so often people jump off the bandwagon if they don't get instantaneous results. And that creates this hodgepodge of offensive decisions that really in the long run come back to bite you in the butt because you're not developing anything.
Okay. Now, can I continue with that? Like, I mean, what was your typical install process look like? I know most coaches start with inside veer or midline, usually one or the other. Okay, but what I mean, and obviously it might change year to year depending on some small factors or something, but like what was your typical install process on what in order?
We always started with inside veer, and we always started with inside veer going weak side. We're still a tight end team. And we always started with inside veer, and we would go weak, and we would go against the fronts we were going to see, and really emphasize the steps. I've never played offensive line. I don't look like an offensive line coach in that, but when I came up here, I had to become the offensive line coach, and truthfully, I kind of turned into a pretty good one. But I also was blessed with some kids that bought in and did the right things. So we would, let's say day 1, we would come out and we would install. Let's assume that during the summer the kids know all the formations already. So day 1, we would start with, hey, we're going to run inside veer against our defenses. Let our young kids learn their defensive alignments, and we're going to run inside veer weak side, and we would run it out of eye backs. We'd run it out of orbit motion. We'd run it out of gun. I'm not a big gun guy, but you got to keep the kids kind of excited, and they got to see some things on TV so they don't think that you're running something when they used to fold up the helmets and put in your back pocket. So we would go inside veer weak, and in probably that afternoon we'd introduced inside veer to the strong side, and that was day 1. And typically by day 3, we were installing outside veer, and we would run outside veer, and you would teach the kids that, okay, and I have and I don't know where it came from, but when we teach inside veer, we teach our line this: we're going to go from the nose of the center to the play side, and the first place we can find a double team is where we're going to double team. And that's inside veer. So if we're getting a zero, a nose guard, and we're getting a reduced eagle front, I don't know what they call it today, I don't know, tough or whatever, but I got 2 tackles in 3. If our center can handle the guy on his own, he's going to call solo. The guard will tag it with a BK, which tells the tackle he and the guard are going to double team. and we're going to double team that guy. We don't combo block. I think kids come off too early. I think blocks don't get finished at level 1. We teach our kids, you're going to double team that guy and you're going to put him in the linebacker's lap. And so we would, really focus on steps and the rules. And we would talk about, hey, we want to attack the bubbles. We want to attack the creases that lead to bubbles. And we really taught our kids how to pick apart a defense with inside veer and outside veer. Well, once you got outside veering on day 3, and outside veering was, okay, we're going to go from the tight end's nose, and we're going to work into the play call, and we're going to find a verse double team. Well, typically, if you're playing a 5-man front, you're going to get that head up on the tight end, and we're going to come down and block that 4-eye or 5 shade tackle and double team and run outside veer and leave that in on an island. If they're not in that, outside veer becomes inside veer, and the kids understand that. So now we have inside veer, outside veer, load, lead, speed, spin. We got 2 blocking schemes and 6 plays behind it. So we would work it, that way. And it's kind of funny. And I was talking to a coach last night. When we put in the option and I wanted to run the option, I did not want to run mesh for an hour and a half every day, having guys read it and do that.
Yeah.
And I think a couple of things that I learned as I was evolving in the option game, when I grew up, and I never played offense, but Servite, like a million other high schools in the 70s, ran the veer, split back veer, Billy Oman, and all that. And everybody was playing head up, reading the head of the offensive lineman and reading. And therefore, your quarterback would take a step back, reach, and read the guy all the way into the line of scrimmage for a half yard and then pull it or give it, depending on what he saw. Well, there's not many defenses that are going to line up head up and read hats anymore. It's gap control, it's pressure, it's, edge players coming. So we had to change the way we think about option football. When I grew up, everybody took 3-foot splits. Well, you take 3-foot splits today at the high school level, you're going to get killed. So we went to 2-foot splits, and we're we put in some zone ideas for guys that are playing tap and go and games like that. You're going to spend. I think any offensive line has to spend time with like 3 or 4 basic schemes and perfect them against what defenses do today. I had, typical, I get here, there's a dad that played in the veer in the 70s. He goes, "You're not stepping right. You're not reading." I'm like, Scott, nobody does it. If we reach back and read it like they did in the 70s, the quarterback's going to get killed. We're going to make quick reads. We're going to stick the ball out. We're going to ride into the line of scrimmage, but we're going to make decisions on pull or give a lot quicker. And Coach Peterson, who years ago was the offensive coordinator at Air Force, I cornered him at a clinic, a glacier clinic. And I said, okay, let's talk about this. He goes, "Hey, half the time we're not reading the inside. Alignment tells us if we're going to give it or pull it." And he goes, "And how many of your kids read a book?" And I'm like, they don't read much. And he goes, "So what makes you think they can read a defense?" And so what we discovered, and we talked about, if you run it, let's say you got a quarterback that's a 3-year starter. So we predetermined it his first year. He reads only the outside part. We predetermined it halfway through his junior year. He's only reading the outside part. But by the middle of his junior year, he gets pretty good at guessing. He gets pretty good at, they're doing this, so I need to do that. And that's worked really well for us. I don't want to spend an hour and a half going, "Did the tackle's shoulder turn you?" I just don't think, I think the game's faster now. I think those reads, and if the service academies who have the brightest, steadiest, best, loyal Americans in all the world are making decisions on alignment, then I think little old Gold Beach can too. And I wanted to be a little bit more diversified than just option. We have a great 3-step passing attack that goes with it. We run buck sweep. I never could get rocket in like Paul Johnson and all those flexible guys do. But I liked what Paul Johnson said. You got to give that defensive end a different look other than down, 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 or arch, arch, arch. So when you run buck sweep, hey, I'm hooking you now. And we usually have no problem hooking the tight end because he's so used to seeing option. And we run buck sweep. I want to run some play action. But we identify as an option team and all the pronouns that go with it. But we tie it to a really good 3-step passing attack and 1-step passing attack that has really done well for us. So that's kind of, I'd say install your offensive line scheme and principles, install inside veer. We always start weak. We always start left. I purposely want to be left-handed because in a lot of places whose kids play both ways, you got to play your kids on the defensive left, so they're handling all those right-handed offenses. I purposely want to be left-handed to screw that up for people. And so that's kind of how it installs. And then we rep. I mean, we just rep. And the kids have actually learned to tell Coach Swift to shut up. I mean, in 2004, I decided, hey, let's put in this little wrinkle. I really like this little wrinkle. And we're trying to do it in practice. And I'm losing my mind because we can't do it. And my quarterback puts his arm around me and says, hey, back out of here, coach. Leave me alone for a minute. And I'm like, okay. He goes, we're going to inside veer. We're an inside veer team. That's who we are. And we proceeded to run inside veer and run outside veer and look phenomenal. And that taught me sometimes you tinker too much.
Yeah.
You got to let the kids run what they believe in. And by the time 2004 got here, our kids believed that we could run inside veer against the Las Vegas Raiders and run it for 4 yards a pop, and we bring it. And you're a coach. When kids start to believe things like that, that makes up for a lot of lack of talent, lack of coaching, lack of all those things. Just that burning desire to run that play. And my kids, everyone says, why you run the option? Because I'm not very sophisticated, guys. I'm a brawler. I'm Irish Catholic, guy likes to go out and get in fights every now and then and brawl. And my kids who consider themselves outdoorsmen, rugged, they bow hunt. They spend, 3 days in the woods surviving on wood chips to hunt. They think they're tough. And so I play to that personality. I mean, we want to be Billy Badass up there on that line. And that works for us. It may not work everywhere, but it works for us here.
Okay. Now you mentioned a couple things there, and we'll kind of hit on first, formation wise. One, how many did you typically carry? And then two, was it like, and I'm just always curious on how people do it. Is it each formation has a name, or did you tag your base formation to get into?
No, this is going to age me. We use Dick Vermeil's terminology from UCLA. So flanker, ER, is 2x1 with a tight end to the right, the X to the left, I-backs. Flank flips it. So we run, let's see, we got flanker, flank, twinner, acer, ace, winger. So, we got 5 formations that we run 5 base run plays out of. And if I need more than 5, we're not going to win anyways.
Yeah.
So.
And then on top of that, I mean, you mentioned, what was it, rocket motion? How many motion, like, I know there's a lot of things you can do in motion, and it's really reflective on what your kids can do and what you want to do that given year. But how many motions did you, obviously you kept the basic orbit motion, but
yeah, we keep orbit motion, but we have zip and zipper, which is, Z motion across the formation. So if we start out in flanker, I can go zip and bring the Z across, to the left side of the formation. we have if we tag flex on any of our formations, that puts the tight end out as a stand-up detached. We don't ever call orbit motion. The kids have to know, oh, this is a play that orbit goes with.
Yeah.
But we don't do a whole lot of, I always wanted to do tight end trade and stuff like that. We just never got to it. So, basically 5 formations, five base run plays.
Okay. I was just curious. Also from what, I mean, you mentioned you didn't want to spend an hour on mesh. Like, and then that's fine. Like, so what did a typical offensive practice look like for you?
We always started off with 15 minutes of endo, and like every good option team, you're on a hose, you're running inside veer. And one of the things we emphasize, even though we're not reading it, hey, you gotta step into the line with the guy. You have to keep your eyes on the defensive end. You have to give the perception that you're going to, one of the things that high school kids do, they get lazy. They hand the ball off because they know it's predetermined, and they don't do a really good job of carrying out fakes, we literally bust out films and show them, hey, look how you taking the fake and carrying it out like you got the ball keeps that backer out there. And then you come back to the next play and he doesn't do a good job carrying out the fake, and he's in there. And we tell the kid, hey, down the line, you're going to read this or you're going to guess this. So we spent 15 minutes. We usually go inside veer, outside veer, and midline. And we usually have, 3 hoses, 3 groups running it. And then we would go to what we called half line. And we would run half line. Well, here, let me back up because that's wrong. We started every day throwing the ball. We were going to start on what we did. What the weakest part of our game is what we always started on. And like everybody who grew up when Mommy was developing the air raid, we run what we call the Kentucky drill, where all 3 quarterbacks and a coach, and we call routes, and everybody's taking drops, and everybody's throwing to the receiver. And we do that for 15, 20 minutes. It's a good little warm up for our kids. They get going, and we get good at throwing the ball. And then we go to the endo where we're on a hose, and we're working on mesh. And I know that nobody uses them anymore, and everybody thinks they're archaic, and everybody thinks it's bad juju. But the linemen go down to a 5-man sled, and I get in their heads. Unfortunately, I grew up on the north gate of Camp Pendleton, and I have a great deal of affection for old school drill instructors. So we'll get on the 5-man sled and we'll work steps, and I do things a little bit differently. My starters are going to get on the 5-man sled, and they may not come off for 8 to 9 reps because everybody can do it once and look good and then go back to the end of the line and wait again. I want to know how you're going to do it on that 7th one of an 8-play drive where you're tired and fatigued. And then I start screwing with kids. Hey, your step's 1 inch long. You got to give me 5 up downs. We're going to do it again. And the kids, I mean, I went to a clinic in Texas a few years ago, the Hill Country one, and listened to the defensive coordinator from Westlake say, my job is to take well-to-do white kids and turn them into mean son of a guns that are going to get to the ball with an attitude. And because I believe in what Bob Ladouceur said about the offensive line, I'm going to make my offensive line fundamentally really good. I'm going to make them come off the ball. I'm going to do that, but I'm going to make them one ornery, mean group of kids that want to do that. And it's very, all my coaching buddies in Southern California are going to just like, he's using the sled. He used his chutes. I bet she uses ladders too. But, I'm running. I'm not saying what they're doing is wrong because I believe it's right. I'm doing what I need to do for my system because it's right here. And at the end of the day, my kids are much more concerned about winning than getting a scholarship. I mean, the number one place our kids go after school is the United States Marine Corps. And I'm pretty proud of that. And we approach the game very much like the Marines approach basic training. I think you can teach kids to be physical. You know, we all as coaches, we got this kid, he's a really good kid, he's a good athlete, but he's just not very physical. He's not very mean. And that doesn't happen overnight, but I think, you know, you got kids for 3-4 years, you can develop a physicalness and not a bully, mean, you know, bad kid in the hallways, but one of a kid who's in the trenches, who's going to physically dominate the guy across from him. You know, we're not a finesse option team. You know, when I got Nebraska's playbook in 1999, and it was from, I want to say 1982, 1983, Nebraska's offense, as you were reading through that, you come to discover, holy cow, they're power football. Yeah. They're running option behind a power offensive line principle. And that's what we became more than that true reading finesse offense that so many people run. Ours is much more based on our influence of power. And, you know, we still, you know, read it and we still, you know, do the finesse, but we tell the kids, if you can't double team somebody 2 yards and the fullback can't fall forward 2 yards, then we got a problem. You need to man up. And I'm a history teacher. 2 versus 1 should win every day of the week. Every day of the week. And so, you know, they adopted their coach's charming personality up front, and we tried to impose our will. So yeah, I hope that answers that.
Now I got 2 more questions for you before we go.
Go for it.
Because I know I know you, like you mentioned a little bit already, and we've talked a little bit about Inside Veer already. And I saw your Twitter exchange. I think it was yesterday at some point. Like, just a couple, like 2 things on Inside Veer real quick. One, I mean, you've mentioned a little bit how you install it, but can you like go through your process of installing it? And then 2, what do you like? Is there any little tips, tricks, anything you think people miss with Inside Veer?
Okay, so where do you want me to install it, up front or up in the back first? So up front, we talk about stance, we talk about splits, we talk about 6-inch steps, we talk about second step down wins. The first step is great, but the guy that can get the second step down and butt where he wants and body position usually wins. We talk about driving the guy in the double team upfield. We talk about getting enough push that it gets in the linebacker's way. We talk about steps and closing gaps and angles. And we spend a lot of time with feet on the offensive line and body positioning. And then we take the quarterback and we say, okay, so it's inside veer. That means you're going to take either a 5 o'clock or a 7 o'clock step on a center exchange. You're going to stick the ball not back to the fullback because he's hitting the hole faster. You're basically going to stick it on the guard's asshole. The fullback's going to come through. As he's coming through, you're going to step and ride with him into the line of scrimmage and gently pull the ball out or put the ball in. And then you're going to attack the inside shoulder of the pitch read, which is the defensive end usually. And if that outside shoulder turns to you, you're going to sit down and pitch the ball. And we talk about sitting down allows you to absorb the hit that the defensive end is going to put on and keep you protected. I think another reason we chose to go to the eye rather than split back, the first couple of years when we were split back, it was really tough for us to get that pitch guy in the right relationship going downhill. I think when you have your pitch back in the eye formation, he's going downhill right away. And so we really talk about the pitch being literally right down the line of scrimmage or just slightly back. We don't want a backwards pitch. We want to be attacking the line of scrimmage. And And so we'll work that. We'll talk about the offensive wide receivers getting off the ball, the aiming point for the stock block. We'll talk about how we can change our perimeter blocking. We can tag it with crack. We can tag it with X. We can, if we decide, let's say that I have a pretty good athlete at tight end, we'll tag it with what we call X, which will bring the Z down to the outside backer, and the tight end will arc out to the corner. I also like that because that gives somewhat of an illusion of one of today's modern pass schemes. So that's kind of how we install it.
Okay. And it really,
I really wish it was more sophisticated than that, but it's not.
No, there's nothing wrong with that. Like, I'm just curious on how everybody approaches things differently and teach things differently. And everybody has found their best way to teach it for kids. And I'm just curious how people do it. Because you can always learn something off that. My last question is really it's really two questions. I'm not gonna lie. I was gonna say it's two parts, but it's really two. So let's I can guess what your favorite option play is. I'm gonna guess inside zone, but I could be wrong. Now, when I say favorite option play, what I'm saying is not necessarily your best play, the one you just generally enjoy either teaching or calling. Is it inside veer or is it something else? Like I'm just gonna ask, like
it's in 2007 we won the state title 42-0. And my late father called me and he just was giggling. He goes, "You're never going to get a job anywhere else." I'm like, "Why?" He goes, "You ran the same play 36 times." I'm like, "Yeah, but you raised me. If they can't stop it, keep running it. And if they stop it, then run it the other way." So our fullback had 258 yards in the state championship. I used to think I loved lead and speed because you bang it outside. Mm-hmm. But one of the things I think why I love inside veer, because I think inside veer makes getting outside easier because that dive keeps those inside backers occupied. Because we're an I team and people know the fullback kind of takes to the ball, when we run lead or load, they kind of, and we run it successfully. I mean, we have ways to get it. But I really like inside veer because I think it allows you to get to the edge a little bit easier. I was always raised and taught that the weakest part of the defense is the C gap. That's the crease that everybody's concerned about. That's the crease that leads to big plays. So if you run inside veer, that keeps that C gap somewhat exposed. So yeah, I mean, you got me. I'm sorry. I love inside veer because I love teaching it. I love inside veer because my kids love it. And truthfully, I think every team adopts the personality of their coach. And Coach Swift is a no nonsense, kick the door in, charming personality type guy. And I certainly don't hide that from anybody. I probably should learn to be a little bit more polished in that, but yeah, I love it. And I love running it weak side. And truthfully, we have a great up tempo, no huddle run where our quarterback's free to call the play because we teach them how to call the play. And my quarterbacks have adopted my personality. We're just gonna my kids are brawlers. I mean, they love 3 yards, 4 yards, and yeah.
Okay. And then my last question is you, because I've been really since the end of the last season, I've started reading really heavily. It's one of the things that I've gotten into really doing. And especially finding older football books is something I've enjoyed. Like looking at my wall right now, I have Football's Twin Eye Attack and Belly Option Football, which are books from the 80s or 90s on the option. Those are just two examples. I got Football Super Split Defense. I have a kicking book from the 70s all over there.
I'm looking at my library and half those books you mentioned I got over there.
So I'm like I generally like old, especially older books. I'll read newer ones too.
Steve, my Bible is Steve Axman's The Modern Veer.
Okay, so that's what I was going to ask you. I was like, do you have any book recommendations?
Yeah,
Or
well, I go one step further. Anything you can get from Bob Ladouceur at De La Salle, documentaries, videos, all of his books, because I think the way Bob and I installed the veer is so much part of the culture that we're also installing. So I think anything, by about De La Salle, one great game, which talks about the Poly De La Salle game of 2000. When the game stand tall. But as far as what I learned, I grew up in the 70s. Servite, Turk Schonert, who was an All-American at Stanford, played in the NFL, backed up Boomer at Cincinnati for years, had to run the stinking veer option in high school. And so, I learned, and I was raised by football coaches. So I think anything in that, but I got the Delaware wing tee. I think like you, and it was really good to hear that out of a young coach. The more I learn, the more I can pick up nuances of everything that are applicable or non applicable. I think young coaches whose egos are a little bit more fragile than older guys who've had the crap beat out of them for a long time. I think they tag their reputation too much to what they do. I'm an option coach, but I'm so much more than that.
Yeah.
And for years we tried to put in rocket. God, we were terrible at it. So hey, well, I faced buck sweep 2 or 3 times during the year. Let's put that in. Because that's going to do. And I love Paul Johnson. And he's talking about you got to give that defensive end a different look. Well, buck sweep does that.
Yeah.
So, I'm an avid reader. I'm an avid follower of the game. So yeah, I'm trying to look. My eyes are going. Chasing Perfection is a great one. Anything by Homer Wright, Homer Smith on the option is really good stuff. So,
okay, I was just curious. Like I said, I literally probably not counting what's in my classroom that I need to read.
Well, and the other thing too is, and I don't mean to plug this, but I'm going to.
Good.
That football tool chest that some guys helped me put together. Yeah. Oh my God! I mean, you can go down so many rabbit holes in that thing. I think one of the things I would like to see more in the football tool chest is more high school coaching, more high school video, more high school. Yeah. In fact, the next article I'm going to write for Kinney and Headsets is, what should your off-season clinics look like? And, nobody likes going to Glacier more than I do. Nobody likes going to college campuses more than I do. But when I started taking my kids and coaches to Modern Day, and we had big camps here, and our coaches had a chance to go hang out with other successful high school coaches and see how they do things, I think that's a little bit more transferable.
Yeah.
I'm not going to have a 6'5" guy that runs a 4-4 playing defensive end ever. So, Florida State can do some things with a 6'5", 4-4 guy at D end. I can't. And so, one of my wishes as I move forward with this helping the profession is have guys willing to share what they do at the high, and we still haven't gotten past that paranoia. If I give it to you, they're gonna know. Well, everybody I lined up against for 18 years know exactly what we're gonna run, and they still had trouble stopping it. I mean, I'm not a rocket scientist. I'm not developing, a rocket to get to Mars. I'm running an offense. So, I mean, I would appeal to high school coaches, be willing to share with peers, because I don't think so many people in your region are going to get and see what you're doing. but you're helping somebody in another region of the country promote the game, promote your style, and promote what you're doing.
Yeah.
So
perfect, Coach. Now, a couple things. One, coaches, the clinic he did for me will be in the bio. The link to the football tool chest will be in the bio. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, all that stuff, so people can not only find this, but the other videos, and including his clinic video that he's done. Check out our sponsor, Coachpad. Give Coach a follow on Twitter. I mean, he's a great follow. Not only he spits out all kinds of information, and he's extremely active. If you ever want to get a hold of him, he is extremely easy to get a hold of. Otherwise, that is in our episode of the Gap Down Backer podcast.